Hey everybody, this is Chris, MTGO's Rex Start, and I'm back for this week's Show and Tell segment, covering the decks of the Legacy Tribal Wars format as they're played in the Tribal Apocalypse Play Run event each week. This past week's event was won by the Snake Trap deck that I piloted about a month ago to first place, and Kumagoro piloted it to first place this week, proving it's not a flash in the pan. So since I've already covered that deck, I'm going to take a look at some of the X1 decks. First part of the video, we're going to look at a Kithkin deck and a Merfolk deck. So let's get started with that. Zoltan here came in sixth place, a 3-1 record with this mono white Kithkin build. And mono white Kithkin are a very popular classic aggro deck. There's something about White Weenie that people just seem to like, and this has a notable on the first order for his one drops. There's a known bug that Mia Hitler talked about and has been discussed before, where Gold Meadow Harrier for some reason doesn't count as a Kithkin in creature types. Moto doesn't recognize it. So when you run Harriers, they basically aren't counting towards your creature count anyways. So rather than run Harriers, Zoltan decided to just run Mother of Runes as his 5th through 8 1-drop. Gold Medal Stalwart, of course, the 2-power 1-drop, part of what helps you get off to a great start with this aggro deck. He split his spot removal between a couple Pabs and a couple Swords to Plowshares. Wizened Sen, pretty standard here. Knight of Meadowgrain, also extremely standard. The first strike on this guy makes him tough to tangle with, so he's, and not to mention the lifelink, so he's very solid against other aggro decks. And he's also got Ballynock Cohort in here, who will be a 3/3 first striker the majority of the time. And again, very difficult to tangle with this guy. Mist Metal Skulk, kind of an odd choice here. Don't see this one a lot, but it does have protection from larger creatures. He can slip through and do some damage if he's got some pumping effects in play. And of course, there is Honor the Pure and Wizened Sen to make this guy hit just a little bit harder. Kinsbale Border Guard, you nearly always see at least a couple of these in a Kithkin list because they not only come in as probably more than a 3/3 for 3 by the time you play them, but they give you a little bit of insurance against board sweepers, since obviously if they sweep the board with this guy out, you get Army in a Can, just pops out of his corpse, and you get right back to beating. So one of the problems with White Weenie as an archetype overall is that it sometimes has a difficult time finishing compared to red decks that have burn spells to give that extra bit of reach, and you really get murdered by Wrath of God. So having something like the Border Guard as a little bit of insurance against that is always solid, and you always need to consider some kind of plan to deal with that whenever you're building this kind of deck. And the sort of plan B to also help him recover from a board sweeper, finish off a game, is Honor the Pure Spectral Procession. And I kind of put the Hawks in that category too, since you can rather easily play a Hawk, keep a few Hawks in reserve in order to put down some pressure at the end of the game if you need to. But Spectral Procession Honor the Pure is going to give you 6 flying power in the form of 3 different bodies for only 3 mana. So it's obviously great against, you can't really trade for it 1-for-1 without throwing a board sweeper at it. And again, it just gives his deck a little bit of extra reach. So pretty classic build here, other than a couple of unusual choices here, but the Mist Metal Skulk. But other than this, all very reasonable choices that you would normally see, and a few special touches that Zoltan's put on here. So another X1 finish here for Zoltan. Grats to him. And we're going to take a look now at the Merfolk list. Let's see, where is that? Okay. This is Romulos's Merfolk list, which admittedly is on the opposite end of the price spectrum in terms of budget, but does certainly have a lot of similarities. This is a 16 Lord variant of Merfolk, which you do see quite often. He's got the Lord of Atlantis and his new updated version, and Coral Helm Commander, and Marrow Reach Array. Silvergill Adept left, which pretty much auto-include in these. And he is going with a few Curse Catchers at the 1 spot. I've always been a little bit underwhelmed with Curse Catcher in both Tribal Wars and regular Legacy, and especially when you don't have a heavy mana denial plan. I just don't see this guy going that far. Might be worth trying Kosi's Tricksters instead, especially if you think your opponent's going to have a lot of shuffle effects, and of course if you're playing Path to Exile, that will make him shuffle his library, so you can always grow your Kosi's Trickster that way. And he's got a couple of Jaces up here. Not really sure about the value of those Jaces there. It seems unusual for a Merfolk build. Yeah, not arguing that Jace is not a good card. He obviously is, but there's only like 4 fetch lands in here, so you're not really maximizing that Brainstorm ability. And you're not the control deck that wants to just +2 over and over, so you're kind of just playing him. I mean, yeah, the Brainstorm's fine and the bouncing a creature is fine, but again, I don't know if this is really optimal here. And he's got 4 Force of Will, but again, no days or anything like that, because he's not going heavy on the mana denial plan. The white splash for all of the 1 mana Exilers, I think, that's probably, if you're going to splash a color in Merfolk, the color you're going to want to splash in Tribal Wars, just in order to have that additional spot removal. And I can't think that any other color would be a better splash, sort of as a baseline build here. And that's really what I view this as. This kind of a baseline build for Merfolk. I don't know about that, but the rest of this is sort of what I would imagine to be the core of a blue-white Merfolk deck. The mana is a little bit interesting in that he's got, first of all, a couple of Celestial Colonnades. So he's really wanting to have a little insurance in case the game goes long. I guess those guys and the Jace as well. He's got the Wanderwine Hubs. Wanderwine Hub is actually a very good dual land for blue-white Merfolk. It doesn't have the real problem that Secluded Glen does for blue-black fairies, where you don't really want to reveal which fairy you have in your hand and give them a chance to play around Spellstutter's Bride or V-Click or something like that. Whereas you don't probably care that much if you reveal a Master of a Pearl Trident to a Wanderwine Hub. So this is a very solid dual land in these decks. Misty's, he doesn't have any basic planes, so you can play whatever dual land you want there, or whatever fetch land you want, sorry. A couple of basic islands and 3 Mutavaults. So again, he may be thinking that between the 2 wastelands, 3 Mutavaults, that he couldn't really afford any more colorless lands, because you do have in this variant 12 creatures that are costing double blue. So you don't really want to push it too bad here. You need to have a reasonable chance of hitting double blue in a timely fashion. So Coral Helm Commander, I'm just personally not a fan of. I'm not a fan of Kargan Dragonlord either, which we'll look at in one of the deck lists in part 2. Just because these guys just, when I played them in Standard, I just got time walked so darn much with these guys. Now you can be careful and try to wait for an opening to do it, but again, I'm just not sure about the Coral Helm Commander. You've already got, all these other lords here. But again, he doesn't have an awful lot of competition here. The only other thing I could think is something like Augur of Bolas, which this deck list isn't really built to optimize anyway. So, as long as you're careful with this guy and you avoid being blown out, at least he is still a bear. And so just don't pump too much mana into that guy if the opponent has a very obvious spot removal spell waiting. Unless, of course, you can take care of that. In part 2, we're going to take a look at a couple of decks. While these decks were really straightforward, linear aggressive decks, we're going to take a look in part 2 at decks played by myself and AJ Impey that looked to attack specific trend in the metagame that we've been seeing recently. So join me for part 2.